The hearing panel primarily focuses on procuring cause, which is the determiner in most disputes between brokers. As we mentioned earlier, there is no template for procuring cause. So, what is procuring cause?
There are several definitions we can share, but primarily, procuring cause in broker-to-broker disputes can be described as an uninterrupted series of casual events that result in a successful transaction. As NAR's Code of Ethics and Arbitration Manual puts it, what caused the successful transaction to come about? The manual defines a successful transaction as a sale that closes or a lease that is executed. A series of casual events could consist of the first showing of the property, negotiating the terms of the offer, writing a successful offer, arranging for financing, coordinating property inspections, or scheduling appraisals. A single event in and of itself does not determine procuring cause or entitlement. Hearing panels do not have predetermined rules, or rules of thumb as some call it, to determine who is procuring cause. In other words, being the first to show the property or the one who writes the offer does not mean the real estate professional is the procuring cause of the sale.
Here's a tip. If you are a complainant or a respondent in an arbitration proceeding, you can help the panel by sharing with them a chronological list of your series of events. Remember, the panel was not present and does not have firsthand knowledge of what happened. As they say, the devil is in the details.
No one wants to end up in a commission dispute before an arbitration panel. Here's one example of how it could go.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I'm here today because I'm due $8,000 from the respondent, Lauren. The $8,000 is the compensation that was offered to the procuring broker in the sale of 16 Maple Avenue. I met the buyer, Fred Ferber, about 5 years ago. Fred was looking for his first home and I was his realtor. Fred purchased a small condominium through me and we always stayed in touch. In late February, Fred contacted me to say he was ready to purchase a larger home. He's recently divorced and was gaining custody of his children. Fred needed a large 3-bedroom home with at least 2 bathrooms. He had no plans to sell his condo because his mother was moving in. Fred had great credit, so he easily pre-qualified for a loan. I immediately recommended he begin looking in the West Oaks area. It was the town next over and it had excellent schools. Plus his office is located on the border of West Oaks, so it would be an easy commute. He agreed that we should begin there. During the month of April, I showed Fred a total of 15 homes over the course of 3 weekends. At that time, the financial markets were very unstable, so Fred decided he wanted to wait until the market settled down a little bit before purchasing a new home. He said he would contact me soon. I was on vacation during the middle of May, and he left me a voicemail and sent an email letting me know he was ready to look again. I sent him several updated listings and advised him to take a drive by them and contact me to set up showings. We made appointments and viewed 4 listings, including 16 Maple Avenue, which happens to be my own listing. Following this outing, I became increasingly busy with several other buyers. I had 6 short sales under agreement, which took the majority of my attention in those weeks. In the beginning of June, the seller of 16 Maple Avenue agreed to a price reduction of 10%, which I posted in the MLS. By the end of July, it was reduced another 10%. Over the course of the listing period, which was roughly a year, the seller had reduced the price dramatically. The property was not a short sale, so it was a difficult listing to market. The seller was not realistic about the state of the market and for some reason was not in a hurry to sell. I contacted Fred and told him about the price reductions. He was very, very excited about the property. Now I needed to grab another call and told him to call me when he was ready to write an offer on the property. Imagine my surprise when I received a full price offer from Lauren for 16 Maple Avenue. Upon closer inspection, I came to find out Fred was the buyer. I informed Lauren that Fred was my buyer and I would not recognize her as procuring cause. Lauren acknowledged the dispute and we agreed that we would resolve the problem after the transaction closed. When I tried to contact Fred, he wouldn't return my calls. Naturally, I had no intentions of getting in the way of the deal because I had my seller to think about. As luck would have it, I ran into Fred's mother. She was excited about moving into the condo. She asked me how the sale was going, and I told her Fred was working with Lauren to close the deal instead of me. She informed me that she was at the party where Fred met Lauren. According to Fred's mother, Lauren was very pushy and told him she would get him a better deal. Apparently, Fred told Lauren that he was working with me, and she told him, oh, don't worry about Steve. It's not like if he's not going to get paid, he'll still get the listing side. The seller accepted Fred's offer and the property closed by the end of September. Upon closing, I declined to pay Lauren the $8,000 compensation that was posted in the MLS. Lauren may have been a member of the MLS, but I am clearly the procuring cause. This, Madam Chair, concludes my opening remarks.
Lauren, the respondent, will now cross-examine Steve, the complainant.
Isn't it true you never brought in an offer on your own listing?
Yes, it's true.
And did you tell Fred he could offer less than full price?
No, I didn't because I didn't have a chance. Fred didn't call me back. He met you at the party his mother told me about the same evening he was going to call me back. It was the last time I heard from him.
Well, I understand you're very close friends with Fred's mother, and that is a wonderful story you just told. But why isn't she here today to confirm what you just said?
Because I did not want to bring her into this.
At this point, the hearing panel would question Steve, the complainant. After the panel questions Steve, Lauren would state her case and present any evidence or witnesses.
I want to thank all of you for being here today. It's true, I met Fred at the party Steve told you about. Fred told me how he needed to buy and move into a house by the end of September, and he was ready to make an offer. I asked him why he hadn't, and he said his broker was busy, and he hoped to get something done very soon. I gave Fred a brief tutorial on the current state of the market and the fact that since most of the listings are short sales, he needed to act quickly if he wanted to move in by the end of September. Fred got very nervous, and then he started to wonder why Steve hadn't told him that. I asked him if Steve exclusively represented him, and he said no. So I offered to show him other listings, and he said he just wanted to write the offer on 16 Maple Avenue. He said the price had just come down, and he didn't want to wait any longer. When I checked the MLS, I realized it was not a short sale, and I asked Fred to come to my office. After looking at the comps in the area, I counseled Fred to write a full price offer, even though he wanted to go 10% under the asking price. I explained to him if he wanted this property bad enough and he wanted to move in by his target date, he needed to show the seller he was serious. As an experienced broker, Steve knew full well that this buyer was ready to make the offer. By not making time for Fred, in my opinion, he abandoned his buyer, which is a definite break in his series of events. Therefore, I am the procuring cause of the sale.
At this time, Steve, the complainant, would cross-examine Lauren. Following Steve's cross-examination, the hearing chair would ask both sides of the dispute to give a closing statement. The hearing would then conclude, and the arbitration panel would go into executive session.
To assist hearing panels in identifying the relevant facts in a commission dispute, NAR has created an arbitration worksheet. It includes the question, the answer, and whose side of the arbitration the answer favors, Steve, Lauren, or neither. It contains a list of questions based on the comprehensive list of questions found in the arbitration guidelines. When a request for arbitration is submitted to the local association, the association is required to provide the complainant and the respondent with a copy of these guidelines. You may find them helpful in preparing your case.
Here's a tip. If you're wondering whether you have a good case for procuring cause, ask yourself some of the questions provided in the arbitration guidelines. It may help you decide whether you should file for arbitration or not. You'll find it's a good tool for every office to have.
Based on the facts in the arbitration between Steve and Lauren, who do you feel is the procuring cause of the sale? Keep in mind the series of events created by both parties. Let's start with Steve. Steve had a long-standing relationship with the buyer. He initially showed the buyer over 15 properties. Even though the buyer took a short break, he resumed his relationship with Steve. Steve continued to show the buyer more listings, including 16 Maple Avenue, which happened to be his listing. Steve monitored the listing for Fred and notified him of the price reductions and told the buyer to call him if he wanted to put in an offer. This is where Steve's series of events ends and Lauren's began. Lauren meets buyer Fred at a party the night Steve told Fred to call him if he wanted to put in an offer. Lauren educates Fred about the market and the sense of urgency if he wanted to close before the end of September. Lauren researches the comps in the area and recommends Fred make a full price offer. He does. She writes the offer, submits it, and the offer is accepted.
Well, look at the facts. Lauren never showed the property. Steve did not write the offer. It was less than 24 hours since Steve and Fred discussed the offer over the telephone when Lauren submits the offer. Don't forget, a hearing panel cannot have a predetermined rule or rule of thumb that says whoever showed the property first or whoever wrote the offer is the procuring cause of the sale. In a way, both were instrumental in bringing the buyer to the closing table. But in arbitration, there is only one winner. There are a lot of questions that need to be answered before a realtor can be declared the winner of this arbitration.
For example, did Steve drop the ball? Did his buyer feel abandoned because Steve didn't stop to write the offer? Instead, he asked Fred to call him when he was ready. Did Lauren insert herself into the transaction? Did Fred, at Lauren's insistence, move quickly at full price to bring this transaction about? Communication between the buyer and the realtor is crucial. In fact, poor communication could cost you your commission. What if the facts in this case were the same, with one slight change? Could that change affect the outcome of this arbitration? Yes, it could. As we said earlier, the devil is in the details. Let's say Fred decided to terminate his relationship with Steve, even though Steve did everything within his power to maintain an ongoing relationship with Fred. If you were on the arbitration panel, you would want to know why the purchaser terminated the relationship. Was there estrangement? Was the buyer turned off by Steve's actions or lack of action? Often, the realtor is totally unaware of a buyer's issues until it's too late. What if Fred waited a couple of months and then submitted his offer through Lauren? Could timing affect your decision? It all goes back to the series or chain of events as defined in Procuring Cause. The series of events for Steve and Fred were going smoothly until Steve asked Fred to call him if he wanted to write an offer. Did a break occur to interrupt that series of events leading to a successful transaction or closing or executed lease? Or was the successful transaction actually brought about through the initiation of a separate, subsequent series of events by the second cooperating broker, in this case, Lauren?
Now that the case is in the hands of the arbitration panel, the panel has a difficult job ahead of them. The standard of proof on which an arbitration hearing decision is based is a preponderance of the evidence. Preponderance of the evidence means evidence which is of greater weight or more convincing than the evidence which is offered in opposition to it. Evidence which, as a whole, shows that the facts sought to be proved are more probable than not.
Whom do you think won, Steve or Lauren? It's up to the individual hearing panel to decide. Arbitration awards are signed by the majority of the panel members and do not include the panel's findings or rationale for the decision they have made. Why? According to the Code of Ethics and Arbitration Manual, while this might be beneficial to help the non-prevailing party to understand, if not appreciate, the basis on which the award was based, there is concern that such findings would set a precedent which could be introduced and relied on in future arbitrations. As you know, no two transactions are alike, which means no two arbitrations are alike. Arbitration panels must take extreme care in their deliberations and consideration of all relevant facts and circumstances, which is why precedents and predetermined rules should never be allowed to enter into the process. Again, if you were on the hearing panel, who would you award the commission to, Steve or Lauren?
Time for a quiz on Chapter 8, Procuring Cause. Question 1. Broker Bob has a listing on a short sale. Buyer Todd's offer doesn't make it through the short sale maze in time to beat the foreclosure clock. The property forecloses and the listing broker is replaced by another listing broker. Broker Jane now represents the bank. Naturally, the buyer still wants to buy the house. As soon as the property goes back on the market, the buyer submits the offer, it's accepted, and closes. Broker Bob watches all of this go down, and because he was the listing broker when the buyer decided to make the purchase, he feels he is the procuring cause of the sale. He decides to file for arbitration. Is this procuring cause or not? Pause the program here and continue when you have your answer. If your answer is no, you are correct. Unfortunately for broker Bob, time ran out. If the buyer had been able to break through the short sale red tape before the bank assumed ownership of the property, Bob would have been able to collect his commission on closing day. The mere fact that Bob was the listing broker on the property when the buyer viewed the property or wrote the first contract does not mean he is procuring cause of the sale. He represented the former owner in the previous negotiations, but the one whose series of events led to the successful transaction was the buyer's agent, not Bob. The buyer's broker was the procuring cause of the sale. Bob was simply a victim of unfortunate circumstances. Can a buyer gum up the works when it comes to procuring cause? You bet.
Here's another scenario. Sales associate Linda is upset because her buyer, Frida, jumped ship and went to work with sales associate Don. She had worked hard on trying to get buyer Frida into her dream home. Linda wrote the offer for Frida, and all it needed was her signature on the dotted line. To her dismay, she found out that sales associate Don, a cousin of Frida's, ended up in the deal. He even used the contract she wrote, removing her name and substituting his. Worst of all, he was paid her commission at closing. Linda wants to file for arbitration, but her broker turned her down flat. He felt it wasn't worth his time, and it certainly wasn't worth the trouble of going to arbitration. He told her to get over it and move on. As far as he was concerned, the matter was closed. Linda was furious with her broker. Her mind was made up. She is moving to a firm that cares about their agents. Before she finds a new broker, she decides to file the request for arbitration herself. Can Linda file for arbitration without a broker? After all, she earned it. Pause the program here to consider your answer, then start the program when you're ready. Arbitration is between brokers. If Linda's broker refuses to join her in the arbitration, the grievance committee has no choice but to dismiss her request for arbitration. If her broker joined her, Linda would be permitted to participate because she has a financial interest in the outcome, even though she is technically not a party to the arbitration.
Ready for another one? Okay. Brad was up to here with his broker Sam. Enough was enough, so he decided to change his firm affiliation. He had 4 properties that were about to close, but felt his independent contractor's agreement protected his commission, so he went ahead with the move to his new firm. Brad's broker, Sam, wasn't sorry to see Brad go. He had been nothing but a thorn in his side since he joined the firm. Sam decided that Brad deserved nothing for all the trouble he caused, so he decided to keep Brad's commission. He figured it served him right for walking out the way he did. All 4 closings took place in a row, and Brad was astonished when he discovered that Sam had no intention of paying him the commissions he was owed. Brad filed for arbitration with his local board. Can Brad file for arbitration against his former broker, Sam? Does Article 17 require Sam to go to arbitration with Brad? The answer is yes. Brad can file for arbitration against his former broker. Again, in-house of same-firm disputes, such as this one, are voluntary on the part of the local association where Brad holds membership and on the part of his former broker, Sam. This is considered a same-firm dispute because the matter involves commissions that were earned while the sales associate was affiliated with his former broker, Sam. If you take a closer look at Article 17, it clearly states that disputes arising out of relationships between realtors with different firms shall submit the dispute to arbitration rather than litigate the matter. In Brad's case, the dispute is within the same firm. Therefore, Article 17 cannot compel Sam to arbitrate with his former sales associate. Furthermore, the local association must also adopt a policy to hold voluntary arbitrations. If the association chooses not to hold voluntary arbitrations, it would be a moot point. If Brad is unable to arbitrate through the local association, his only recourse to collect his commission is to take broker Sam to court.
Let's change the facts a little in the Brad versus Sam scenario to make things more interesting. Brad has been showing property to buyer Pat, who is a longtime friend of the family. Brad finds the perfect home for Pat. He shows the property and starts negotiating the deal. Everything is going smoothly. Brad's ability to provide Pat with top-notch service was not affected by his move to Realtor Russ's firm. He submits the offer through Russ's firm and is confident that his commission is in the clear. The property closes, and both Brad and Russ happily head to the bank to cash their commission checks. Brad has big plans for his commission. He's already booked a 2-week cruise. While Brad is looking through the travel brochures, he receives a call from Realtor Russ, who tells him that Sam had filed a request for arbitration with their local association to collect the commission they earned on Pat's transaction. It seems Sam feels Brad procured the buyer while he was affiliated with his firm, and that he is entitled to the broker's side of the commission instead of Russ. Brad told Russ he can't do that, but can he? Pause the program here and think about it. Then hit play when you've got your answer. Sam has every right to invoke the arbitration facilities of the association. Why? Because he believes his firm is the procuring cause of the sale, since Brad showed the property and negotiated the deal while he was affiliated with his firm. The contract was written after Brad went over to Russ's firm. Sam is of the opinion that this is no different from two cooperating brokers competing over the same commission. The only difference is the sales associate happens to be the same person. Even if the sales associate were another agent in Russ's firm instead of Brad, he would still file for arbitration. The next question is this a mandatory or voluntary arbitration? Since Russ was paid the commission Sam believes that his firm earned, and they are in two different firms, the fact that the sales associate had worked for both firms doesn't change the fact that this is a mandatory arbitration. Remember, arbitration is between brokers, but there is no contractual agreement for compensation between the two brokers.
That's true, but it qualifies as one of the non-contractual exceptions under Standards of Practice 17-4. Next scenario. What does a listing broker do if more than one cooperating broker claims entitlement to the selling commission? Buyer Rudy worked with Realtor Vicky for 6 months. Both had lost count on the number of properties they'd seen together. One property stood out above all the rest, 1224 Coral Way. The price was way too steep in the beginning, so they kept looking. Finally, the seller decided it was time to drop the price within Rudy's grasp. Vicky went to bat for Rudy. She did everything within her power to negotiate the price down to Rudy's comfort level. The seller was still stubborn and refused to listen to reason. Rudy even withdrew his request for the seller to pay closing costs if the seller would come down to his price point. But it was all to no avail. Rudy was beginning to wonder if Vicky had what it takes to make a deal close. They had put in offers on 2 other properties, and the same thing happened. It was obvious that she didn't handle rejection well, and he was concerned about her approach when she submitted the offer. He was losing confidence in her ability, and she snapped at him when he brought it up. Finally, the two decided to move on and keep looking for property. Rudy noticed Realtor Tommy's booth at the local home show, so he stopped by to get his opinion on his situation. Tommy was convinced he could get the seller to come down. He had dealt with this type of seller before, and he had a tried and true method that always worked. Tommy asked if Vicky was his exclusive buyer's representative. Rudy said no. Rudy told Tommy about all the time he spent with Vicky, but admitted he felt Vicky didn't have what it takes to get a contract accepted. Out of fairness to Vicky, he made it a condition that if he worked with Tommy, that Tommy would share a portion of his commission with Vicky. Despite her nasty disposition, she still deserved to be paid. Tommy agreed to Rudy's request to pay a referral fee if he closed the deal.
Rudy called Vicky to thank her for her service and to tell her he decided to end their relationship and that he would be working with Tommy from now on. He told her that Tommy would pay her a referral fee if he was able to purchase 1224 Coral Way. She would need to contact Tommy to work out the details. Vicky was furious and did not hesitate to tell Rudy what she thought of him. He was nothing but a turncoat in her estimation, and that she had every intention to pursue the entire commission. She made it clear that she would refuse to accept any pittance Tommy offered her. Immediately after she spoke to Rudy, she called listing broker Tammy and put her on notice that she would pursue the entire commission if Rudy closes on the property. Tommy delivered on his promise to negotiate a price that made both the buyer and seller happy. Now the listing broker had a dilemma on her hands. 1 commission, 2 selling brokers. What can she do? If you were Tammy, what would you do? Pause the program for a moment to consider your answer, then start the program again when you're ready. In this case, Tammy could invoke the arbitration at the association and let an arbitration decide who she should pay. Or she could go ahead and pay the selling broker she believes is the procuring cause of the sale. If she chooses the latter, the selling broker, who does not get paid, could file against the one she does pay. For example, if Tammy feels Tommy was able to bring about the closing and pays him, Vicky could file against him and Tammy, or just Tommy. The best solution would be for everyone to sit down with the association mediation officer and try to work things out. But as we've said before, mediation is voluntary. So if Vicky refuses to mediate, the next step is arbitration. Who would you award the commission to? Would Vicky's treatment of Rudy be a relevant factor, and would it influence your decision? We hope these scenarios on arbitration have been educational.